Technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. Now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is a Friday weekend edition, and as you can imagine, we're going to be spending some time, first of all, talking about a couple of religious liberty cases, and then my guests around the round table, I'm sure they have an opinion or two about the Olympics. I know they have an opinion about the certainly State of the Union address and about an attempt to vote on the SAVE Act, which is one of our action items that we have here, and a variety of other issues, also the concern that we may indeed be going to war with Iran. So if you think we're going to cover all that in 2 hours, well, probably not, but we'll do our best. And we are privileged to have in studio with us Erin Smith, Associate Counsel with First Liberty Institute, Kelly Shackelford, of course, President, CEO, and Chief Counsel for First Liberty Institute. And we do have a lot to cover, but Erin, let me come to you first. First article here, the 10 Commandments. I have found a lot of people saying, okay, Texas passed a 10 Commandments law. Louisiana passed a 10 Commandments law. What happens next? Give us an update.
Right. So Louisiana and Texas have both passed, and then even more recently, after Louisiana and Texas, Arkansas passed a similar law requiring the posting of the 10 Commandments, one of those buildings being public schools. And that was immediately challenged, predictably. We knew that, that those kinds of laws were going to see immense opposition from people that don't want consistent history being taught in American public schools. And so that was immediately challenged. The district court in Louisiana issued an injunction, meaning, hey, Louisiana, you can't enforce this law. You can't force the public schools to put up the 10 Commandments. The same thing happened in Texas, where an injunction was also entered in Texas saying, Texas, you also can't enforce your law. And then the same thing happened in Arkansas, where they said, hey, also, you can't do it here either, by the way. And so the Fifth Circuit heard arguments about the law a couple months ago, really in January, and they came back with their decision recently that just said, hey, those of you that are challenging this law in Louisiana, you don't have standing, which for those of you that aren't, legal experts on the call, or you're not familiar with the term standing, it just means it's not the right time. You have to have certain requirements. Standing is kind of like the bouncer at the courthouse doors that just says, you can't come in yet, or you don't have these, you have to have injury, or you have to show that the state has harmed you in some way, this law has hurt you, and we can trace it directly. Or we can't fix it for you. You don't have something that's redressable. And so the Fifth Circuit came back and said, hey, not the right time. This injunction is invalid. And so Louisiana's law can go into effect. And so there will be another challenge. And we'll see if the courts will address the merits of the argument once the 10 Commandments get posted.
Kelly, one of the things we have listed here is RFIA, which stands for Restoring Faith in America. And that's one of the things you've been saying is that these people that are challenging that, they go back to 1980 at Stone versus Graham, which said you couldn't post the 10 Commandments in a Kentucky school. But things have changed, and in some respects, there are more opportunities than ever before.
Yeah, the Coach Kennedy case overturned the Lemon case, which was a 50-year precedent that had been used to sort of create a government hostility to religion. So anytime there was any sort of display of religion on government property, it would come under attack under Lemon. Well, Lemon was overturned in Kennedy. It's no longer the law, and it's because it was bad law. It was confusing. It wasn't what the founders said. But it had been used to knock down over 7,000 citations, knocking down religious displays all over the place. That's not the law anymore. The law is, after Kennedy, that if something is religious, but it's a part of our nation's tradition and history, it's okay. It's fine. It's presumptively constitutional. Well, the Ten Commandments is about as history and tradition as you get. I mean, you literally cannot go anywhere in the country and not see the symbol on some government building, including, by the way, in the Supreme Court, on the outside of the Supreme Court. I mean, all over the place. It was in the first readers that our first public schools gave to the children. There's 10 Commandments in there. Why? Are they telling them they need to be religious and they need to have religious beliefs that are consistent? No, it has nothing to do with that. It's teaching that our nation's history and tradition, in fact, legal basis, moral basis, religious ideas underpinning the founding of our country come from that Judeo-Christian philosophy. And if you don't understand that approach, you are going to be incredibly uneducated in the schools. And so the idea that you can't post it is just ludicrous.
Yeah.
And in fact, during the oral argument, one of my favorite questions was, well, so you're saying you can't post Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail? Because it's much more religious.
Much more religious.
Yeah. And
even the Declaration is more religious if you think about it.
So it's a ridiculous argument. The Fifth Circuit sat, by the way, en banc, meaning instead of just 3 judges, which you normally get at the Court of Appeals, all 17 sat at one time.
Isn't that something?
And they threw these decisions out by the district court judge, where they try to strike down the 10 Commandments. I was interviewed yesterday by The Hill on this, and they said, what do you think about the Supreme Court taking? And I said, it depends on what the Fifth Circuit does and what the Eighth Circuit with Arkansas does. In my opinion, if they rule that it's perfectly okay to have these laws, then the Supreme Court won't take it, because they kind of laid this out in Kennedy. If, however, somebody is trying to sort of buck the Supreme Court and what they did in Kennedy, I think they will take it.
Right.
And bring some extra clarity for those who are intentionally trying to not understand what the Kennedy case says.
You know, I was just thinking, Erin, when you were in law school, more recently than anyone around the table, in some respects, you were learning about how you couldn't post these 10 Commandments or religious symbols, but things have changed rather dramatically.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a little jealous of the people that have come to law school after me, because they've gotten, the Supreme Court has really, and through the support of First Liberty's donors and the cases and the clients that First Liberty has had, rewritten the constitutional law textbooks, especially regarding religious liberty. And so I'm jealous of the education that they're getting, because they're actually learning the right way to interpret the Constitution.
I think the textbooks need to send us a check.
Yes.
Because we're changing a lot of the cases they're studying.
Have a very significant footnote or blow-up quote or something like that. Just before we take a break, because I do want to talk about your other case, Restoring Faith in America. That's something that you have really instituted. We've had the link there before, restoring our most cherished history and traditions community across America. We just got a green light. We certainly got a starter flag, whatever you want to say, for anybody around the country to have this taking place in their own community.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, there are 10 Commandments monuments going up across the country. I've been in installations. It's great. We're bringing back the history, the traditions of our country, that our communities are not supposed to be naked public squares. We have a Judeo-Christian heritage that really does affect who we are as a people. And they can just go to RFIA, Restoring Faith in America, rfia.org. And every month they'll get a new idea of something they can do in their own community, bringing faith back into their community. And we've already won the case at the Supreme Court. Just a matter of them doing something.
Going to take a break. We're going to talk about a case out of Nashville, and then we'll get into some other issues in the news. All that coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Economist Jordan McGillis explains why the middle class feels poor. In his op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, he discounts the claim by Michael Green that the new poverty level is $140,000. I also dismissed that idea in my December commentary. Jordan McGillis says the reason so many Americans in the middle class feel poor is due to the Great Decompression. This is the phenomenon of incomes rising across the board, but much faster for families above the median. This is the upper middle class have done much better than those below that percentile. He reminds us that hasn't always been the case. During the middle of the 20th century, we saw significant middle-class expansion. I talked about that in my book, The Signs of Warning and Signs of Hope. The middle class and the lower middle class saw their wages grow faster than those above the median. Then something changed in the 1970s. He says since about 1975, though, we've seen an era of upward escape for families with the right human and social capital, which has become even more valuable than the rise of digital technology and globalization. As a result, the upper middle class is running away from the pack. He doesn't say why. Could it be the fact that the U.S. went off the gold standard in 1971? That constraint unleashed the printing of fiat currency that gave us inflation. Wages did not keep up with that inflation, so those who could invest in assets did better than those who did not. He concludes that the basic material needs of Americans are more fully met today than they were 50 years ago, but the higher income families have more opportunity for advancement. That's why the middle class feels poor. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Get to those calls a little bit later, but I thought we would at least focus on one other story, which we did talk about last week. But I thought, Erin, let me come to you for just a minute, because this is a case out of Nashville, Tennessee. It's always amazing how some of these cases that you might think would have come out of New York or California, Illinois, are coming out of places like Mississippi, in the case that you have before the Supreme Court, or this one. But here, an individual, Eric Rivera, first grade teacher in Antioch College Prep Elementary School. And he said, I just don't really feel good about reading these books about same-sex marriage. So you think, well, of course, we'd make a religious accommodation, let some other teacher teach it if that's what you want to do, or maybe we should just rethink whether we want to even teach it at all. And instead, he gets banished from the classroom. So tell us what's going on.
That's right. So, we represent Eric Rivera, who teaches in what's called the KIPP Antioch College Prep Elementary School, which is in Nashville, Tennessee. KIPP is a part of a larger conglomerate of charter schools. KIPP just stands for Knowledge is Power program. But he saw the curriculum and saw that one day he was going to be required to read this book about same-sex marriage to his first grade students. And he had a religious objection to that and just thought, I can probably I'll just swap classrooms with another teacher for today so that I don't have to read this book because it conflicts with my religious beliefs. Right. But I'll make sure that the book still gets read, the curriculum is still complied with. And so he just switches. Day goes fine. Kids get read the book. Unfortunately, for the kids whose parents don't know that the kids were getting read the book. And so then the principal calls Eric into his office and says, why didn't you read the book? And so you have to read the book. And Mr. Rivera said, I'd like a religious accommodation. And instead, the school pushed him to a different classroom. They said, no more first grade for you. You're not going to teach these kids anymore because you have a religious accommodation. There's nothing that we can do. And so we've written a letter to the school district telling them this is a problem. And also we're seeing that the parents may not have been aware. And so we've alerted the school as well, hey, you may be violating parental rights. Not only are you violating Eric Rivera's rights, you might be violating parental rights too.
There was a Supreme Court case on this, right? Mahmoud. where they did this kind of things with young children. And the Supreme Court said, number one, you have to notify the parents if you're going to do something like this. This isn't math. This is pushing, you're getting into social issues now and pushing it on first graders. Okay? We're talking about first graders. And so everybody who's in a KIPP school all over the country, as I understand, there's like 300 of these schools. It sounds like the parents aren't being told that they're doing this with their young children. This is usually in lower income areas, so maybe they feel they can get away with more there. Maybe there aren't as many parents watching. I hope it's a wake-up call to people. But what they said to Eric essentially is any teacher who has a traditional view of marriage is not allowed to teach. I mean, that's just so extreme. I mean, he did everything right. He said, look, I've got a problem. Let's find a way to accommodate. Another teacher taught it. He was actually in the classroom when they did it. So he didn't, he was there. He didn't abandon his post, whatever. So he did everything right. And in fact, it was okay until the principal found out. And then the principal said, well, why did you do this? And basically told him that somebody with his beliefs can't teach. And so I guess most people, because most people do think marriage is a man and a woman, can't teach in any school. So this has got problems on a lot of different levels. And I think maybe Eric's willing to do things the right way and to stand up will result in lots and lots and lots of families finding out that this is going on with their children without knowing, and hopefully make clear that you can't do this kind of thing to teachers.
Yes. Well, and again, I was just thinking, Erin, that oftentimes we say, wouldn't it be good if we could get more men to teach in the grade schools? Because it would be great to have some positive male role models. Isn't it wonderful that somebody would be willing to teach in that particular school setting who is an individual that is a strong father figure perhaps to the kids and also has traditional values? And yet the schools actually say, nope, we're going to get rid of you right off the bat simply because we don't like some of your views because we want to force those views on the young children.
Yeah, it's really sad that a school district is going to punish someone who just wants to teach children. And of course, the principal saying this to Eric means the principal's telling it to every single teacher inside that school. If you are going to object to anything that you have a religious objection to, then you don't belong here and you shouldn't be instructing our children. But I just really want to applaud Mr. Rivera. What a great example that he is setting for his students and for his peers, that he's willing to say, you know what, I believe this and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to cave just because the school is upset with me or is punishing me. And so I think he is setting a great example for his students about what standing up for your beliefs really does look like.
Yeah, and look, there's not a lot of case law out there. There's some. We've got another case, a pretty important case, the Marisol Castro case. Now, of course, the Coach Kennedy case, Coach was a coach, meaning he's an employee. He's like a teacher. He's not in a classroom. So we've got a Supreme Court victory there on his rights that are going to be very powerful for Eric. But these kinds of cases, to have more cases, he's going to help set precedent unless they wise up and back down and say, hey, we made a mistake. We're looking at the law now, and we're not going to do so well. And by the way, it's not only the law of Coach Kennedy with regard to the government. It's also the law of religious freedom in the workplace, right? Which is Gerald Groff, if you'll remember that case. And the right of accommodation and how powerful that right is. There's very little excuse now for not accommodating somebody's religion. You're going to lose. So we've got both sets of two Supreme Court victories right on point with what we're dealing with here. And again, if the KIPP schools are smart, they'll realize they've made a mistake here and they'll get this corrected. But if not, we'll set a precedent. and Eric will be the one leading the way for every other teacher across the country.
Yeah, you've had so many good precedents that in some respects you think enough would be enough, but you'll never know. But again, we might also mention that you also have, of course, a case before the Supreme Court right now that you're waiting for as well, right?
Yeah, we're waiting on the Olivier case, which was Gabe was a guy who was literally handcuffed for sharing the gospel in a public park. And you think, well, how can that be? I mean, surely we know that, right? Evidently not, because they created a 10 by 10, essentially free speech zone. You have free speech in the park in that 10 by 10.
Which your square.
Which, by the way, is 800 feet from the amphitheater where everybody is, right? And when he walked out, they handcuffed him. And so amazing. Then they wouldn't let him have his day in court, which I won't get into all the technical parts of that, but we argued that at the Supreme Court in December. So we're waiting on that. I would encourage people to pray. It'll affect not just Gabe and even not just the right to share the gospel, but it'll really affect every American's right to have their day in court when their civil rights are violated. So it's an important case to everybody across the board, but be watching for that. It could come down any time. I think it will be handed down by the Supreme Court between now and May, and we'll see. We'll see. Well,
we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about should we celebrate the Olympics? No, that would be controversial, but this particular piece by the editors of National Review, yes, celebrate the U.S. men's hockey team and some of the reaction. And of course, yesterday I quoted from Batya Ungar-Sargon, who said, when the right found out that Alyssa Liu was woke or liberal, well, they still celebrated her. When the left found out the men's hockey team is partial to Trump, they turned on them. So again, we see a little bit of a difference there. So we'll get into that. We'll get into the State of the Union address. Should you stand or should you always sit during some of the statements made by the president? And we will eventually get to the issue of the SAVE Act, but that's what's up there right now for you. If you go to our Take Action item, we are recommending that you contact your 2 United States senators about the SAVE Act, which stands for Safeguarding American Voter Eligibility, requiring voter ID requirements for elections. And again, we'll come back and get into some of those issues as well. Lots of things to cover on our Friday weekend edition. Kelly Shackelford, Erin Smith with us. And if you want to know more about them, you can go to firstliberty.org. Just click on their picture. You'll find the first 2 articles we've talked about here, as well as many others that we've posted. Let's take a break. We'll be back right after this.
Who can you trust? Years ago, many of us could probably have provided a fairly long list, but today it seems we almost can't trust anyone. Educators don't even know what a woman is anymore. Many so-called public servants have shown all they care about is themselves. The FBI has been accused of bias, law-breaking, betrayal, and journalism. It's largely corrupt, with no Clark Kent standing up for truth, justice, and the American way. All of this is why Point of View Radio is more important than ever, and your part in supporting us is more needed than ever. Do your part today in supporting trustworthy truth. Stand with us and help push back the lies and the darkness. Visit pointofview.net. Don't put it off. Take a moment right now and click on that big blue button that says Donate Now. Or call to invest at 1-800-347-5151, pointofview.net, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Kelly Shackelford, Erin Smith in studio, and one of the things we did want to talk about are the Olympics. I haven't heard anybody around here talk about that too much, and so as a result, this article is one written by the editors of the National Review. Yes, celebrate the U.S. men's hockey team, and they remind us that they were able to bring home the first gold medal for the program since the 1980 Miracle on Ice. Let's not leave the women out as well because of what they were able to do in a very significant fashion as well. This, I think, is very significant, but you, Kelly, wouldn't know that by looking at, and about the fourth article goes into all the horrible, really crass statements made by journalists, some of whom are sports journalists, about turning this celebration that we used to have back in 1980 when we had the Miracle on Ice into something that is political. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised, but it is discouraging, isn't it?
Well, there's so much in this story. Number one, it's sort of a picture of, the one thing we all should be able to get around is the hockey team winning the gold medal, especially the men's team, which hadn't won since Miracle on Ice, 46 years ago.
Right.
The women have been great, but they've actually been winning.
Yes.
Right? The men, it's been 46 years. This is the kind of thing that everybody can get behind, should be no issue, but yet people can't. They just can't. They have to make everything a fight. And this is one of the things that I think Americans have really wearied of, is trying to politicize everything. It's like, I just want to watch sports.
Right.
Okay? I just want to be pro-America. I just want to, invest in a business, I'm buying stock, and the next thing you know, the company feels like it has to do this or that, or they try to, they're just everything they can to infuse politics into it. And people are like, they're screaming, shut up. I don't want that. That's not why I'm getting away from that to go watch the game.
Yes.
Okay. Please allow me to be pro-America without infusing your nutty stuff into this. And so, it's just crazy. But the other thing it does expose is that a lot of these sports writers are left-wing crazy people. ESPN got that way. It really cost them. And newsflash, that's not good business for your audience, because your audience is not that way. The average sports person watching the ball game is sitting in his lazy boy chair with a beer in his hand, and he's not looking to get woke or to get into politics at all. So it's just crazy that what they're trying to do. The whole country should have been able to rally around. It's not political. It's okay for the president to be there, whoever the president is. It's the office of the president standing with America's hockey team. So again, Americans believe that way. This is not just me, right? Proof? How do you prove that, Kelly? Well, go to the hockey game last night and look at Jack Hughes, who is, with New Jersey. He's playing in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh. Yeah, that's the big pro-Trump, left-wing woke area, right? And there they are. There they are giving a standing ovation to the opposing player against their team that night. That shows you that America gets this. And these crazy articles and this stuff, all it does is shows that you are really in an isolated, warped group if you can't celebrate what happened.
I love what it says here is Jack Hughes had his teeth knocked out by a stick during the game. I think we all saw that. And then returns to or the winning shot. His brother, of course, Quinn Hughes, scored the game-winning goal in the quarterfinals. Their mother, Ellen Hughes, won the World Championship in the 1992 U.S. women's hockey team. And then they had, of course, this one individual, Johnny Gaudreau, who was supposed to play for the team and died tragically at the age of 31 after being hit by a drunk driver. And you, if you were watching this, saw what happened. The team gathered his jersey after that and then even grabbed the kids. And of course, I've got my jersey here, the one we got from the Dallas Stars, so at least we'll show that we love hockey as well. But if nothing else, Erin, I think it's an illustration that probably the least sport that is woke is men's hockey. What do you think?
Well, I think that this is a good case study for whether or not hockey is woke. And so really, I mean, it's sad. It goes to show that the people that are writing these horrible things about the gold medal winning U.S. hockey team that beat Canada, beat a lot of other countries, they are insistent on ripping apart anything that would cause unity in America, right? There's something that America is always unified over. It's our sports teams competing in the Olympics. And again, I think, right, the American people are uniting around the Olympics, but the people that are writing the articles, right, not the ones reading, the ones writing the articles don't get it, just like what Kelly's been saying and made it very clear. They don't understand. And it becomes even more evident when they're celebrating someone like Eileen Gu, who is competing for China as an American. And they're like, this is the best Olympian that we've ever had. It's great. We love it. China is done horrible things to their own people. They persecute religious liberty. They don't want to see their people be free. They're anti-American in any way that they can be until it benefits them in their market or economy. They're willing to work with us if it's going to make them money and give them more power. And so it's sad. It's sad to see them pick Eileen Gu over the men's hockey team just because they have a political agenda that's not consistent with what their readers even want.
And again, I quoted from Batya Ungar-Sargon, who at the end just said, when the right found out that Alyssa Liu, who won the gold medal, was liberal and probably woke, they celebrated her anyway. But when the left found out the hockey team liked Trump, well, that was the end of that. And which brings us to our next article, because Miranda Devine reminds us that some people were standing and some people were not. Why would you not stand for at least the hockey team? Why would you not stand and salute individuals who lost friend, family, child, whatever, all those individuals, some of whom took bullets when they went down to Venezuela? Kelly, I have seen some times in which one particular party sits on its hands, almost always the Democrats, but I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like what unfolded Tuesday night.
Well, it's really stupid politics. They did it last time. Mm-hmm. If you'll remember, the little boy who was dying, and they what did they do? They gave him a badge, or they did something. I can't remember what
Secret
they did.
Service.
Secret Service. It was precious, and everybody in the country was applauding that young boy, and they wouldn't stand up. And you're like, what is wrong with you? That's what Americans think when they look at that. And look, we have a tradition with this. If you've watched all of these State of the Unions for years, I have, you'll see when the president says something that the other party disagrees with, they stay seated. But if they agree, they stand up. It's only under Trump that this has happened with the Democrats. This is that Trump derangement syndrome thing where they have such hatred for him that they do things to damage themselves. It's amazing to watch, but they do it over and over again. It's just stupid politics, number one, because Americans are watching as the lady is weeping as the president is talking about her daughter who had her throat slit in the subway, and how they're standing with her, and the place stands up for her, and the Democrats don't. It's like, how dark does your heart have to be to stay seated? This is a really bad political move on their behalf. Even if they were going to differ from the normal course of how you do States of the Union, this was not a wise political move on that. And I think they need to catch themselves, because they're harming themselves greatly when they do this. And I hope no party ever does this in the future. You should stand when you agree. If you want to sit and say you don't agree, sit. I mean, that's great. We love discussion, disagreement, but not the kind of thing we saw that night, numerous times, by the way.
We're coming to a break. We'll come back. I want to get some more comments on this. But the exception proves the rule. John Fetterman, because on a number of occasions he has been willing to buck his party, but there are people saying that even some of those sitting were looking around seeing whether or not they were allowed to stand or sit, because if they stood and supported the president, well, then maybe they'd be primaried. And so I want to get back to that, because that kind of gets into the whole issue of course, the midterms and some things. Matter of fact, our February issue of Outlook's on the midterms, and I'd love to get some thoughts about that. We will certainly also talk about everything from voter ID to Iran. We've got a lot more to cover, as you might imagine. But let's take a break. We'll be right back.
It's been 3 years since Budweiser featured transgender personality Dylan Mulvaney's face on cans of Bud Light. This was a horrible business decision from which Budweiser is still working to recover. Plus, it began a 3-year death spiral for the corporate influence strategy employed by the Human Rights Campaign. Family Research Council applauds this collapse in its daily news outlet, The Washington Stand. Editor Suzanne Bowdy writes, America's largest and loudest LGBT activist group, once feared by corporate boardrooms and executives alike, now finds itself in the uncomfortable and unusual position of intimidating no one. HRC once claimed tremendous success convincing large companies to sign on to its Corporate Equality Index, which ranks how well companies perform on all kinds of woke concessions. Firms score points for doing things like paying for gender transition procedures for employees and their family members, publicly supporting pro-LGBTQ legislation, training staff in trans ideology, opening restrooms to both sexes, adopting pronoun policies, and recruiting based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Achieving a 100% score on the Corporate Equality Index was held out as the gold standard for companies. Hundreds of Fortune 500 firms signed on. A low score or refusal to participate would bring on public criticism by the HRC. In her piece, Suzanne Bowdy says that now a 100% score is more damaging than desirable. The 2026 index shows a 65% loss of Fortune 500 participants, dropping from 377 companies in 2025 to just 131. The first company to resign the index was Tractor Supply, followed almost immediately by John Deere and Harley Davidson, then Lowe's, then Ford. It's hard not to wonder why firms with such a salt-of-the-earth masculine vibe would have ever signed up. As Will Held, executive director of Consumers Research, told the Washington Stand, corporations' job isn't to tell Americans how to live or what to believe, but to simply serve their needs. Amen. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, we're talking about, of course, one of the articles we've posted here by Miranda Devine, and this is something you can read in the New York Post, but we've posted it so you can read it. And I think it illustrates both Kelly and Erin something that one of our guests years ago said. If you look at the issue of immigration, it touches everything. And I'll give you a couple of examples. First of all, the president said, "So tonight I'm inviting every legislator to join with my administration in reaffirming a fundamental principle. If you agree with this statement, then stand and show your support. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens." Okay, we recognize what happened there. Then we're going to get to the SAVE Act because some people have said maybe that's about dealing with immigration. But then even when you had the response to the State of the Union address, and that came from the governor of the state of Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, she was making the case, which we've debunked on this program many times, that actually illegal immigrants, illegal migrants, illegal aliens, whatever phrase you want to use, actually are less likely to commit a crime than the average American. And it just seems to me that, and then of course we have the Angel families. We're talking about whether it's the murder of Lake and Riley, or of course we just talked about the Ukrainian. In every case, Erin, it seems to me that almost all of the really striking things about the State of the Union address, the response to the State of the Union address, the resistance to even trying to have people have an ID before they vote, it all really comes back to this issue of immigration, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. And it's the treatment of it is so stark from the two sides. And I think you can just boil it down to what President Trump asked them: stand if you agree that, you know, the role of the government is to protect American citizens before it protects, you know, anyone else, illegal immigrants. And the Democrats, just most of them, I mean, I wasn't sitting there counting when they showed the audience. I wasn't, you know, but the left side of the room from where the camera was situated above just stayed sitting. And I think, right, this is pure, if you are a Republican running in the midterms, this is exactly what you wanted to see. This is what you're going to play on repeat, right? When asked whether this was the responsibility, this person did not stand up. They do not value you, and they do not value American citizens. And they can point to voting records, and they can show highlights from the State of the Union. And for anyone that thought that the new governor of Virginia was a moderate, I mean, I think you better know now that that's not the case, because I watched about, 15 minutes of it and had to turn it off because I couldn't watch it anymore. There were other things on TV that I found more entertaining. So, it kind of boils down to this main issue: do you value America or not? And the answer is, right now, it looks like Democrats are saying no. And it looks like the Republican Party is saying yes, and willing to actually do something about it, help the families, get rid of the illegal immigrants that are harming hundreds of thousands of Americans, murderers, rapists, child predators, all these people, and getting them out of the country so they can't hurt any more Americans.
Yeah, you could see the ad right now. I mean,
sure.
Just to add a couple of these things we've talked about, right? Show them responding to stand if you believe that Americans should be protected first before illegal immigrants, and you see none of the Democrats standing. And then follow at that with just show people the poll that says Democrats aren't proud to be American, or, you know, they're and immediately the person, you know, the voiceover or whatever can immediately make the connection, right, that they don't love America. They're not proud of America at all, and just go right into there. And I mean, that's not even really. I mean, it's not even. I mean, it is an immigration issue, but it's really not. It's really
that's bigger.
Are you proud to be an American or not?
What kind of country do you want?
Or do you not want borders at all? Because you don't really think there's anything special about America. And I mean, there's all kinds of things they can take, but that's definitely one that they just handed the Republican side. Which, again, it's really dumb politics. The other thing is the number one reason why Trump was elected. I mean, everybody says there's two, so I'll go with two. But number one was the borders, right? I mean, And the economy is part of that. But, of course, that's part of the economy. And, when all these people are flooding through the borders, taking all these jobs for, much lower pay, it affects everybody else. And then you have, of course, inflation and all that happened there under Biden. But immigration's a huge deal about controlling the borders. So while obviously the Minnesota situation, when you had a state, and especially the governor and everybody else creating these situations that were really dangerous for everybody, and then you had what I think is clearly, at least in one case, the officers, not acting correctly. Now, again, I think it's because one of them heard he's got a gun.
Yeah.
When you're arresting somebody, they're somewhat resisting, and then you hear they've got a gun. But it was obviously, that's the one that stands out. But I think Americans, again, are smart enough to understand, okay, I see that. That's wrong. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. But I still think they want the rapists, the criminals, the murderers, all these people that came in over the line. I think they documented over 11,000 murderers alone. I think they want these people out. And so I think, the Democrats need to be careful with that, right? They just kind of think it's like, abolish ICE. And that's not what Americans want. They do want the borders under control. They don't want the abuses, but they do want the border under control. So I think this is a huge issue. It's the reason Trump got in office. He's fulfilling his promise. I think he goes a lot better with Tom Homan than he does with other people.
Yes.
He's had so much experience at this, and he was,
even got a medal from Obama.
From Obama, yeah.
Yes,
so
that's right.
But it's a big issue. It's a huge election issue that will affect, I'm sure, the midterms as well.
Let me just mention, since you did talk about borders, there was a back and forth between the Pope and Mike Johnson, you might have noticed. The booklet that should be in your mailbox right now is the one I wrote a while back, even before all that happened. It was called Borders and Deportation, because I think, as we point out before, a country without borders is not a country. And so I went through in a little more detail than obviously the Speaker of the House could go into. And more recently, you've had this flap between one particular evangelical preacher who quoted one verse out of the book of Leviticus and everybody reacting to it. So there seems to be a need for people to think through these issues biblically. But as you pointed out, everybody's very concerned, I think rightly so, about the loss of life that took place in Minnesota. But this article, if you go to the third page, Peter Navarro, who's been, of course, the trade czar, and we've had him on once before, and I recognize not everything Peter Navarro has said or has done we would always agree with, but they have done a calculation and come up with a 50,000 body count. If you count up the number of people that have murdered, the number that have been sexually assaulted, the number that have been burglarized, the number have been violently assaulted, and the felony drug traffickers that were all illegal aliens, you came up with what? 50,000 Americans. Some who lost their life, some who lost their circumstances, their property, whatever it might be. So yes, be concerned about what has unfolded on the streets, but you seem to have some misplaced compassion for the other individuals that you didn't stand for at the State of the Union address. So something to think about, and that's why we give you this article by Miranda Devine. She gives you some facts and figures which frankly I had not seen, and that's why we've posted it on the website at pointofview.net. We're going to take a break, come back with more right after this.
Where does moral truth come from? According to 58% of Americans, individuals determine moral truth. A quarter of Generation Z says society determines moral truth, and morality can even change over time. Only 42% of Americans believe that truth comes from God. I don't know about you, but I find these numbers extremely troubling. It really is a crisis of truth, and that crisis has consequences. Look at society. Evil is called good, good called evil. People with biblical beliefs are called bigots, or worse, they're canceled. But there is hope. The Bible promises the truth will set us free, and that's why Point of View is relentless in our commitment to the ultimate source of moral truth, God's Word. At Point of View, we know that God's truth is eternal, and if we stand together, we can help more Americans apply His truth in their daily life. Help Americans find truth again by giving at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just wanted to tell you, too, how much I have appreciated Point of View over the years. I've always been taught that we take care of our own, and I feel like Point of View is one of our own because of the Christian worldview that you do promote. And so I have become a partner today, and I just want to thank you so much, and just God bless you for all that you do.
Listen, I wanted to make a quick comment. I'm a relatively new listener to the show, and I really kind of stumbled upon it more than anything because I'm doing some driving now that I wasn't in the past. And my comment really is, I think you guys and gals are more right on about the assessment of this country right now than anything I've heard. You know, I go home and I tell my wife, you've got to hear what they're talking about on the show. It's just so right on. And I tell my parents the same thing.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, we are going to spend some time again talking with Kelly Shackelford, Erin Smith, and one of those issues, Erin, is a piece by Kevin McCullough. We had him on Monday, and we talked about a couple of issues that he has been writing about, but this one came out yesterday, and I thought it would be appropriate. ID to vote, checkmate. Now, what he's talking about is, of course, we already have pointed out the fact that 84% of registered voters support requiring a photo ID to vote. That percentage only varies slightly between Anglo-American, Hispanic American, or African American, but it's pretty much almost an 80-20 issue. But for whatever reason, you have leaders in the Democratic Party, Chuck Schumer being one of those, referring to it as Jim Crow 2.0. So what's the strategy? Well, we've encouraged our listeners, of course, to click on the See More point, or just scroll down and have the Take Action item, and we've encouraged people to contact their two senators. But the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, says, well, even if we can't get it passed, and it should be a no-brainer, but it isn't, we should at least put Democrats on record. And I think this becomes a campaign issue, don't you think?
Yeah, I think right alongside that State of the Union is going to be the SAVE Act. They can run their back-to-back ads in the midterms against their Democrat opponents. But yeah, I think I saw Seth Dillon and his team at Babylon Bee they did their, satirical video about SAVE Act. It really just highlights the absurdity of opposing this when so many Americans support it. It's just dumb. Like, the common sense, even as a politician, tells you if your people support it, they're the ones that elected you, you should vote for it. That's what they want. That's why you're there, is to represent their interests. You're not there to represent your own interests. You got elected by people that you are responsible for.
Well said.
And so yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. I think it'll become, probably a campaign issue, but it shouldn't, because it's such a no-brainer. And I think Kevin McCullough does a good job of laying out it's already the rule, right, that non-citizens don't get to vote in U.S. elections. This is just bringing it into, okay, now we have a lever to enforce it. So
yeah, it really, obviously sometimes the president says things and you're not sure you agree, but he said, why would you not vote for this? The only reason you don't vote for this is if you want fraudulent elections. Mm-hmm. And he's right.
Yes.
Because 80% of minorities think that you should have an ID before you vote, that we don't want non-citizens voting in our elections. So this is an 80-20 issue. And really, you have to ask yourself, because their arguments for why they're against it are so clearly disingenuous. The idea that people can't get an ID is silly in our society. So that's not it. So what is it? Well, it's, there's going to be less people with IDs who vote Democrat. Well, no, they've all got IDs, every one of them. And if they don't, there's a provision for them to get it. That's not an issue. The only reason is, and I think in particular, it's the whole mail-in ballot thing.
There you go.
And
And
you know,
didn't Justice Ho talk about that in one of his opinions?
Which in the old days, the Democrats said that's the most dangerous area for corruption in elections, back before they knew they were going to need to change sides for some bizarre reason. But that's the only reason, because this does stop the states that want to do this mail-in, where you really don't know who's voting and where there's all these ballots in the mail, and it's just it's obviously not a way, for security, for voting. And so that really is the only explanation, is they want fraud. They want, because otherwise it's kind of basic. Okay, let's make sure you're a citizen. Now you can vote. So I think the interesting thing is going to be whether the majority leader will do what a lot of conservative leaders ask him to do in a letter that was published that says, look, we always do this cloture thing where people, you have to get 60 votes to bring it to the floor. And so, well, in this case, you need 7 Democrats to join the Republicans. Well, they just hide, and everybody calls it a filibuster. It's not a filibuster.
No, it's not.
We have rules for filibuster. They're already in place. You're not changing any rules. It's just a matter of
make them talk,
make them do a real filibuster.
Yeah.
If you want to sit there and challenge the idea that people get an idea before they vote, then sit there and create the theater for years and for weeks or however long you're going to do it. And let's let every American know what you're doing. I think that would be a great thing. And we'll see how committed they would be to that. But, that's the way it's supposed to work. And we'll see if he does that or if he does a different way to just force a vote, which I think we need to pass this just to make sure, because obviously there are people that have some other intention if they don't want people to have IDs when they vote.
Might just mention again this article by Kevin McCullough. We had one earlier in the week, and in that one he went through a very long list of other countries that require, what a surprise, an ID to vote. And Kelly, you can remember when President Barack Obama used to say, why can't we be more like Europe? And I said, well, if we were more like Europe, we probably wouldn't have transgender surgeries. Abortions would be more limited. And if we were more like Europe, we would require an ID before you vote. Because if you look what's going on over there, that is certainly the case. So that is just one more piece about that. And we'll see whether or not this is the case. But this was just a little bit of a behind the scenes. I know sometimes it gets into inside baseball, as we sometimes say it, but the chess pieces of trying to move that around and what the Senate Majority Leader John Thune might do. But just before we take a break, let me also mention that when we oftentimes talk about voter fraud, we almost always do an interview with either John Funn or Hans von Spakovsky. But one that's coming up, and you saw it yesterday if you read my commentary, is an interview we're going to do with Peter Schweitzer. Now, Peter Schweitzer's new book is The Invisible Coup: How American Elites and Foreign Powers Use Immigration as a Weapon. Now, one of his chapters is called Voter Mills, and he points out that back in the 1990s, now this girl wasn't doing the show back then, but we can remember the 1990s, right, with Bill Clinton, they were actually under the Clinton administration pushing through people very quickly through immigration and naturalization who could not speak English. And that's one of the requirements. And so they were all sorts of caseworkers pointing out the fact that they saw applicants who supposedly met all of their criteria, but they could not even speak English. They did not encounter that at all. Well, it turned out to work very well because as a vote generator, 85% of those individuals voted for Clinton Gore. So this whole immigration issue has been going on for a while. So we might go back in history a little bit and talk about how this game has been played for a long, long time. But just thought I'd mention that real quickly. We come back, the president did say something in the State of the Union about inflation and a few other things and affordability. It's going to be a campaign issue. I want to get some comments around the table, so we'll do that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Economist Jordan McGillis explains why the middle class feels poor. In his op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, he discounts the claim by Michael Green that the new poverty level is $140,000. I also dismissed that idea in my December commentary. Jordan McGillis says the reason so many Americans in the middle class feel poor is due to the Great Decompression. This is the phenomenon of incomes rising across the board, but much faster for families above the median. This is the upper middle class have done much better than those below that percentile. He reminds us that hasn't always been the case. During the middle of the 20th century, we saw significant middle-class expansion. I talked about that in my book, The Signs of Warning and Signs of Hope. The middle class and the lower middle class saw their wages grow faster than those above the median. Then something changed in the 1970s. He says since about 1975, though, we've seen an era of upward escape for families with the right human and social capital, which has become even more valuable than the rise of digital technology and globalization. As a result, the upper middle class is running away from the pack. He doesn't say why. Could it be the fact that the U.S. went off the gold standard in 1971? That constraint unleashed the printing of fiat currency that gave us inflation. Wages did not keep up with that inflation, so those who could invest in assets did better than those who did not. He concludes that the basic material needs of Americans are more fully met today than they were 50 years ago, but the higher income families have more opportunity for advancement. That's why the middle class feels poor. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, let's see if we can go back to the State of the Union address. And Kelly, again, I think the president certainly has understood some of the winning issues, but one that could be a very significant losing issue for some of the people that have supported Donald Trump, especially the Republican Party. And that's illustrated by the fact that on the response to the State of the Union address, the governor of Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, made a big deal about affordability. Now, we've pointed out before that if you're really concerned about affordability, you probably don't want to live in blue states or blue cities. But okay, even today we have evidence of the fact that the producer price index, which is different than the consumer price index, so this was kind of giving you an idea, suggests that inflation might be rising again, and that is the price index for producers. And of course, some of that could be due to tariffs, which the president is certainly producing. So that is the case. I think there are questions that the president could have raised or comments he could have made, because ultimately core inflation is a lot lower than it was under Biden. Mortgage rates are lower. I want to get Erin's comments on that in just a minute. Lower than they've been in 4 years. Price of eggs down 60%. Gasoline prices are down. I noticed how little I'm paying there. Oil production is up 600 barrels a day more than we've had, and that is certainly going to bring the prices of a number of things down. Also, the president, let's just give him credit, his secured commitments, are you ready for this? $18 trillion in national and international investments. So, not to mention the fact that I think some people, when they get their tax returns, they're going to be surprised. No taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security. These are the kinds of comments the president should be making instead of saying, I just think this whole idea of affordability is a sham. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, if there's anything that this president understands, it's the financial sector. His first term, undoubtedly, he had the economy taken off like a rocket until COVID. But before then, I mean, it was crazy how positive it was. And I think the plan here, and again, he has brought down inflation. The problem is he came in and Biden had just really damaged the economy. All the extra spending bills, the $1 trillion Green New Deal, what did they call that? I forget what they called it.
The Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah, they just changed the name. They had like a Green Deal for $1 trillion, and they called it the inflation, which is a total lie. When you infuse $1 trillion into the economy, inflation occurs. It's automatic. So we had this huge inflation, which is why people couldn't afford gas. They couldn't afford, he had the a tax on drilling and all that. So what happened is it was all raised up to where it's harder for people to afford things that they used to could afford. And Trump can't take it back down. I mean, once the prices go up,
it's like a ratchet.
They don't come back down.
Yeah, don't come down very often.
He can make improvements, but he has lessened the inflation. And I think the plan was this big, beautiful bill. The idea was that it's going to come into play. And it would have, if it hadn't passed, I mean, everybody's taxes were going way up, which would have been a disaster for the economy. And no Democrat voted for it. So it's crazy to me. But so they passed it. And I think the theory that they had is if we get this done, it's going to happen and people are going to start to see it right before the midterms. And they calculated the economy and everything that's going to happen. I think the theory that they have is that by the time we roll into November, things are going to be humming. And we already see a lot of things beginning to turn around. But I think it was a mistake it's a mistake for the president to say, we're already there. Things are great. It's great if you're in the stock market, true. And yes, the gas is way down and eggs are way down and you can keep going. But beef is way up, right? And other things are most people are still in shock from what happened to them during the Biden years, and they don't feel like things are much better yet. And so I think he should be honest and realistic with people.
It would be better.
And because I think he does have he's one of the most knowledgeable presidents we've ever seen on the economy, on that whole area. And we do see housing costs beginning to come down, but it's just people are still hurting from what happened the 4 years under Biden, and it's Trump's job to sort of fix that. And he should say that. He should say that. I'm trying to fix it. It takes a while. We're making progress. And I think they're expecting a lot more progress when the tax returns and everything happens that's about to happen.
Love to get your comments, Erin.
Yeah, I think it just kind of goes to show that it is much easier to break something than it is to fix it. Like, that is so much easier. You hand somebody a pencil and you say, break this pencil, they snap it in half. You hand them the two pieces of the pencil and say, fix it. A lot harder to do. And the same thing goes with the economy. And so I think, that's very true that Trump should have just, let's be honest, we'll level with the American people. It's going to be hard for a while. We're working on fixing it. Let me show you how it's gotten better. Let me point to tangible examples like he did in the State of the Union with gasoline prices or whatever it was. And I think he highlighted another thing that goes to the housing, right? We know mortgage rates have dropped for like the same level they were in 2022, which is the first time they've been at 6% since then. So that's a good thing. But he highlighted this issue with these massive investment firms like BlackRock that are buying neighborhoods and paying for them in cash. And they're buying these neighborhoods out from under young people, out from under families that are trying to buy a home for the first time and renting them, right? They're making a profit on these people and taking away property that they should have had access to, but they're not swimming in millions of dollars in cash that they can just spend on a property. And so I think he highlighted that as well. And I think it's something that people have started to pay attention to when they've realized, oh, this is happening in places like neighborhoods outside of Nashville, where these investment companies know that this property is really valuable and they can go buy it and rent it because people want to live there. And so, yeah, it's a problem. It's a work in progress. But again, much easier to break something than it is to fix it. And so grateful for all the steps that President Trump and the Secretary have made.
Yes. Well, Scott Bessett and, of course, even some of the other individuals. I was just thinking that the Wall Street Journal, just before we take a break, made a comment the other day, and it was very interesting. If you look at some of the agenda for Donald Trump, Democrats would jump on that, trying to prevent big companies from buying homes. And
they clapped for this.
They did.
They stood up and clapped for this part.
But
this was
will
one of
they
those
actually
times.
allow him to do that? Going after the drug companies. I mean, there were a couple of times when he said things that you said, I would expect Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders to have said that, because he is looking at what is best for the American people. And yet you know darn well, even though they'll clap for it, they don't want to give him any victories. And so even things that Democrats might have got behind in terms of a bipartisan way, Kelly, that brings us back to the Trump derangement syndrome. Even things they like, they just simply won't help because they don't want to give him any victories at all.
Yeah, and that's, again, Americans are tired of that.
Yeah.
They're tired of a Congress. But, what they think is if nothing happens, they'll just blame the people in power.
Yes, and that's what will happen.
Yeah, you hope, and I don't believe they are. You hope people aren't that unsophisticated voters. I don't think they are. I think there's enough avenues of communication up there. It's not just the mainstream media. It's all these other ways where people will understand if people are just being obstructionists for no reason, even on good bills, even on things that everybody agrees with. I hope they'll get some of that through. The SAVE Act should be one of those, by the way.
Sure.
And I hope everybody will follow up at Point of View and call their senators and let them know that you're watching. Because this is something that 80% of Americans are in favor of, for heaven's sakes. If you can't get those things through, you almost feel like there's very little hope.
I know. And that is, I think, one of the reasons why when we come back, just the discouragement sometimes of the younger voters. But we'll get into the issue of Iran. We have talked about that once last week. And, of course, we have an Outlook article, series of articles coming out in the future on this. But let's, if we can, talk about the stakes, because obviously that is something that the president could have spent more time talking about, but certainly will need to convince the American people if we are going to engage in a military action. So we'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
At Point of View, we believe there is power in prayer, and that is why we have relaunched our Pray for America campaign, a series of weekly emails to unite Americans in prayer for our nation. Imagine if hundreds of thousands of Americans started praying intentionally together on a weekly basis. You can help make that a reality by subscribing to our Pray for America emails. Just go to pointofview.net and click on the Pray for America banner that's right there on the homepage. Each week you'll receive a brief news update, a specific prayer guide, and a free resource to equip you in further action. We encourage you to not only pray with us each week, but to share these prayers and the resources with others in your life. Join the movement today. Visit pointofview.net and click on the banner Pray for America right there at the top. That's pointofview.net. Let's pray together for God to make a difference in our land. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, we want to focus a little bit of time and attention on the issue of Iran. This is something we will certainly continue to focus on. We've talked about it last week. We have an upcoming article or series of articles about military action in the Middle East. And so those of you that actually are donors will receive that. My article on the threat from Iran reminds us that the Shah of Iran was actually in power from 1979, but overthrown by Ayatollah Khomeini. And now, of course, you have the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. But we also have to be well aware of the fact that there has been a proxy war against America. 1983, you had first a blowing up through Hezbollah of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, and then later you had the death of a number of individuals, 241 service members at the Marine barracks. Of course, even when we were fighting the war on terror, when we were in Iraq, we had American soldiers killed by Iraqis. And more importantly now, we also have the fact that Iran has missiles that can range up to 2,000 miles, which threaten not only Israel, but even American installations as well. They, of course, want to have nuclear weapons, and that's why Israel launched what was called Operation Rising Lion back in June of 2025, and shortly thereafter we had Operation Midnight Hammer, took out the nuclear facilities. But there seems to be no interest on the part of Iranians to end this, and Marco Rubio, John Ratcliffe, and others sat down with some of the leaders in Iran. And Kelly, we are still at an impasse because they recognize how much more powerful Iran would be if they were a nuclear weaponed Iran.
Yeah, this is I think it's a hard for Christians, and they're not looking for war. This is a harder one, more complicated than some other situations. I think President Trump's style, he's very much not in favor of war in general, but I think by that what he means is that he's not in favor of Americans dying.
Yeah.
Right? So if you hear him talk about the Ukraine, Russia, he talks about how many people are dying every month. Was it 25,000, I think? And so I do think he has a real heart for that. But I think if you watch what he does in these situations, it's always something like take Midnight Hammer, where we do something, but nobody died, right? I mean, nobody died on our side. Obviously, people died that were in that nuclear site underground. So I think that tends to be his approach. But I think the issue here that makes it more complicated, normally, would we ever attack a nation that hadn't attacked us? No. But this is a really unique nation. I mean, they're the breeding ground for all these terrorist attack groups who are attacking. And if they got a nuclear weapon, I mean, I'm guessing Israel would be number one on the list, but I think we'd probably be number two. And so what do you do about people who are pathological liars? Okay, they are pathological liars. There's no doubt about it. And incredibly evil when you look at the terrorist groups they're funding. They were behind Hamas, who was, and I won't even say because there might be kids listening, what they did to people, including little kids. These are bad people, and if they got a nuclear weapon, I have no doubt that they would use it. They're deranged, and they're pathological liars, so you can't believe anything they say. Everything they say is proven to be false. So what do? You try to sit down, and they're trying to sit down, and I think they know that there's not going to be an agreement. I think they're going through this process. Because even if there was an agreement, it wouldn't be true anyway. So I think there's something coming, and I think this is all a part of laying it out so that everybody sees they were reasonable, they tried to do everything right, but they've got to stop the ability of these people to have a nuclear weapon. So I think that's where they're going.
Let me also add one other thing, and that is not only a nuclear weapon against Israel, but a nuclear weapon that wouldn't necessarily be used on the country of the United States, but above. In the Caspian Sea, they actually launched a couple of missiles in the upper atmosphere that did not have nuclear weapons. You might say, well, what in the world were they doing that for? As a matter of fact, they even have a rocket program in Iran. Do you think that Iran wants to put an astronaut on the moon like we want to do with Artemis 2 and 3? No. They want to actually launch a nuclear weapon in the upper atmosphere, explode that, and then you have an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, which would just devastate all the electronics in the United States and set us back to the 18th century or something like that. So there are some real threats. At the same time, let's also acknowledge, Erin, that we have a lot of Christians. Matter of fact, the fastest growing church in the world, they say, is in Iran. It's not an official church, but there are just a lot of Muslims that have become Christians. And of course, you had, 32,000 protesters, many of which were Christians, that were killed. So there are some human rights issues involved as well, don't you think?
Certainly. Yeah, of course there are. And we've seen that in Iran for decades, right? Just massive human rights abuses. But the thing that really is just so, it's not, like, cool is not the right word. That's not the word I'm looking for. But the gospel continues to spread and prevail, even in areas where people seek to stomp it out, right? And it's happening in these countries where Christians can't speak freely. It's happening in places like Iran, in these Muslim countries where Christians are constantly persecuted. It's happening in China where you can't speak publicly, share the gospel. And so it's encouraging to see that the Lord's kingdom will continue to grow and prevail despite what's happening. But it doesn't mean that we all get to sit on the sidelines and just kind of watch it happen. It doesn't mean that we sit there and watch the persecution of our brothers and sisters in Christ. If there's something that we can do about it, and it aligns with also just wise American foreign policy when we're talking about something like a nuclear weapon. The whole situation, I think, just highlights the value of it matters who you're electing, because they are going to be encountering situations like this. They're going to be appointing someone like the Secretary of State. And that job can be done really poorly, and that job can be done really well. And I think we're seeing Marco Rubio excel in that role. And he's, to his credit, looking very presidential right about now to the American people. And so President Trump picked a great Secretary of State. And so full confidence that the administration is going to make the right decision. And we're going to be okay.
Yeah, I would encourage, this is one of those things, people, you need to be praying for the president. I mean, the president ultimately has to make this decision. And, this decision is either being made or has been made or is about to be made. The timing is right on. So certainly people need to be praying for the Lord to, and we're biblically required to do that,
of course.
But I think there's an extra emphasis here, and it's something that obviously we've got. Our military is all out in Iran, and I don't think it's a practice. They're doing testing, so
something's coming.
Yeah, so we need to really pray, and for wisdom for those involved, including the negotiators.
For sure.
But it's really unique because there just aren't a lot of places that are such a breeding ground and a funding of terrorism around the world. I mean, I can't think of any place more than Iran.
Yeah.
And you add that with a nuclear weapon, and you've got a very volatile situation.
I do like your comment about Marco Rubio. We had him on the program a while back before he became Secretary of State on his book, which helped me understand why he gave the speech that he did at the Munich Security Conference, because he was articulating that. But I've jokingly said in the past that if they ever do a story about Tom Holman has to play Tom Holman, because nobody else like him. And there's a sense in which the same thing with Marco Rubio. I've always appreciated him as a senator. We've interviewed him a few times, but if there is a person who is in his sweet spot, it is Marco Rubio. I mean, he has really shined in that position. And if J.D. Vance wants to run for president, of course, Marco Rubio said he wouldn't run against him. But my goodness, I mean, you are seeing presidential caliber on the part of Marco Rubio.
Yeah, his star has risen dramatically. No doubt about it. Plus, he seems to be doing like 5 jobs. The president keeps giving him an extra job, and he's doing it really well. So he's he's performed incredibly well so far.
Well, let's take a break. When we come back, Penna Dexter has a piece on the shakedown strategy collapsing. And in some respects, that relates to an article that I was originally going to post, which we'll probably talk about next week, because Victor Davis Hanson basically says the same thing. His, of course, takes about 8 pages. Penna's in 1 page. But we'll talk about that right after this.
It's been 3 years since Budweiser featured transgender personality Dylan Mulvaney's face on cans of Bud Light. This was a horrible business decision from which Budweiser is still working to recover. Plus, it began a 3-year death spiral for the corporate influence strategy employed by the Human Rights Campaign. Family Research Council applauds this collapse in its daily news outlet, The Washington Stand. Editor Suzanne Bowdy writes, America's largest and loudest LGBT activist group, once feared by corporate boardrooms and executives alike, now finds itself in the uncomfortable and unusual position of intimidating no one. HRC once claimed tremendous success convincing large companies to sign on to its Corporate Equality Index, which ranks how well companies perform on all kinds of woke concessions. Firms score points for doing things like paying for gender transition procedures for employees and their family members, publicly supporting pro-LGBTQ legislation, training staff in trans ideology, opening restrooms to both sexes, adopting pronoun policies, and recruiting based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Achieving a 100% score on the Corporate Equality Index was held out as the gold standard for companies. Hundreds of Fortune 500 firms signed on. A low score or refusal to participate would bring on public criticism by the HRC. In her piece, Suzanne Bowdy says that now a 100% score is more damaging than desirable. The 2026 index shows a 65% loss of Fortune 500 participants, dropping from 377 companies in 2025 to just 131. The first company to resign the index was Tractor Supply, followed almost immediately by John Deere and Harley Davidson, then Lowe's, then Ford. It's hard not to wonder why firms with such a salt-of-the-earth masculine vibe would have ever signed up. As Will Held, executive director of Consumers Research, told the Washington Stand, corporations' job isn't to tell Americans how to live or what to believe, but to simply serve their needs. Amen. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. Let me just mention that oftentimes we play the commentary that Penna Dexter does right about now, and those of you listening online have actually had a chance to hear it. Even if you do not, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. You'll see Shakedown Strategy Collapses. My commentary today is about the middle class, which we've sort of alluded to, but we'll get into that next week. And one of the articles I originally intended to post, and somehow I didn't get on there, which we'll talk about on Monday, The Graveyard of Destructive Ideas. Victor Davis Hanson goes on for page after page about how do we get these crazy ideas that then eventually become policy, but eventually we see the emperor has no clothes and they fade away. And here's a good example of that. When not so long ago we were in the midst of all sorts of woke ideas, and it seemed like such a good idea to have a transgender personality like Dylan Mulvaney be on the face of the cans of Bud Light. everybody around the table is laughing, in case you can't pick that up. And there were some other examples like that, even Cracker Barrel and the rest. But we'll just stay to this. I've been, Kelly, to some events where they've had shareholder meetings. They hold these down at the Morton Meyerson. And when they'd had shareholder meetings for ExxonMobil, one time when I was there, sitting in front of me were the people from the Human Rights Campaign. And they were trying to push ExxonMobil to have all sorts of various kinds of situations for domestic partnerships and all sorts of other things. And so after a while, you started seeing a lot of these companies wanting to get a 100% score on the Corporate Equality Index. Well, interestingly enough, and this was not just, for those. I mean, she talks about Tractor Supply, John Deere, Harley Davidson, ones you would never have imagined. But nevertheless, I think now common sense seems to be breaking out all over the country.
Yeah, it was fascinating to me. I knew that corporations were moving away from like feeling like they had to have 100% from the Human Rights Campaign, which is a LGBT, basically. But what I didn't know until I read the articles was that not only are they moving away in that they don't need to be 100%, but they actually don't want to be portrayed that way, because then that will actually cost them business. So, I've said from day one of all this stuff that these corporations, they're supposed to make money, right? That's what they're supposed to do for their shareholders. Everything else is really, unless they're doing something evil, obviously, you'd call that out in a second. But, I don't feel good as a shareholder if they've got some other agenda, because it's not my agenda. I'm not investing my stock in that so they can play some game. And it never made any sense. I mean, if you would think most Americans, if they were running those companies, would say, leave me alone. I'm about this business, and I'm trying to make money for my shareholders. And so thank goodness we're moving back to that. And again, it's kind of what we talked about earlier, the politicization of everything.
Yes.
I think I'm tired of it, and all America is tired of it. They don't want it in the sports. They don't want it in the business. How about let's keep politics in politics, And then outside of that, we really don't need to make everything else politicized. And that's part of what's causing the division, the separation, when as Americans, we agree on many more things than we disagree on. So I just think it's important that shifted. And I don't know if you can say exactly why it shifted, but whether you like Trump or not, part of it is he kind of broke the woke stuff. There were things you weren't supposed to say. Free speech was kind of going away. And he, it's just who he is, right? He didn't care. So he just started saying it. And then a lot of these things turned out to be 80% issues.
Yeah.
Transgenderism, a lot of these things that were going on, men and women's sports, all this. And that gave courage to everybody else to say, okay, I'm going to say now, I don't like this either, including the politicization of all these companies and everything. And so I love that we're coming back to this, because hopefully the result of this is removing all this from all other areas of our lives where we just want to take our kids to a sporting event, or we just want to go watch our grandkid play soccer. We don't need all the politics and everything. We want to enjoy life, and politics has an important place, and we'll look at that in politics, but not with everything else where we can't ever avoid it.
Yeah, and I think two companies, right, that come to mind, they got eviscerated by this, right? You think Bud Light and you think Target. Those two companies suffered big time because they played a stupid game and they won a stupid prize. And other businesses are looking at Bud Light and Target going, you guys are dumb for engaging on that, but realizing we're doing the same thing and we better cut it out. And the other day I was reading a news article. Some Pride festival had to be canceled because they didn't have enough corporate sponsors. And so I really think that it's a return for these business owners and shareholders or whoever it is that is at the helm of making these business decisions going, let's just stick to business. That's what we've been doing. It works. Let's not play the politics game. It doesn't get us anywhere because we're going to make enemies as soon as we comment. One side's going to hate us. So let's just not comment at all and just do the thing we're here to do, which is sell products to consumers that want the product and just do that. So it's great.
What a concept, huh?
Yes. Well, and again, it gets back to affordability because people started saying, trying to ban internal combustion cars and trying to have windmills, trying to have and reinstall gender-neutral bathrooms, and just all the kinds of costs that came as a result of this, and telling me that the oceans are going to rise when Barack Obama is right there on the ocean and doesn't look like he's that worried about that. But it's causing me to have to pay more at the pump. I think some of that gets back to the issue of affordability.
Well, and there's more cost than just the money, right? The money is a big cost that everybody was paying, but there's lives that are being lost too, right? When you put somebody in a position because of their race or their sexual orientation or their whatever, you're not picking based upon who's best for whatever that is. And there are numerous examples of people being harmed because of that.
That's right.
So there's a great cost, both a fiscal cost and a cost to lives. And boy, I don't think any of us want to hear that some outside group that has some issue on whatever it is, whether it's LGBT or whatever else, picked our pilot.
Oh, boy.
Not the person who's actually the best pilot, right?
Or your best doctor,
but
or whatever.
We had some major airlines saying that they were going to pick on DEI and all this stuff. And you're like, that is not what Americans want.
Well.
So I don't know who thought that was a great selling point, but I think we've learned the opposite lesson now that people actually want you to be good at whatever you're supposed to be good at.
That's right. Meritocracy. Common sense just breaking out all over the place. Again, if you would like to know a little bit more about the fact that First Liberty, first of all, we should encourage people to pray for the case of Gabe Olivier. And also, if you'd like to know a little bit more, or maybe you're finding out that your school is requiring individuals to read some of these kind of books, you can contact them at firstliberty.org, and that is simply the case. Out of time, but let me just first of all say thank you to Megan for help engineering the program. Steve is actually doing a play in Waco right now. So again, we've had Karen actually producing the program. I thank her for all the work that she has done there as well. Enjoy the weekend. We have a real busy set of great interviews set up for next week. So we look forward to seeing you here on Monday, right here on Point of View.
It almost seems like we live in a different world from many people in positions of authority. They say men can be women and women men. People are prosecuted differently or not at all, depending on their politics. Criminals are more valued and rewarded than law-abiding citizens. It's so overwhelming, so demoralizing. You feel like giving up. But we can't. We shouldn't. We must not. As Winston Churchill said to Britain in the darkest days of World War II, never give in, never give in, never, 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 never yield to force, never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. And that's what we say to you today. This is not a time to give in, but to step up and join Point of View in providing clarity in the chaos. We can't do it alone, but together, with God's help, we will overcome the darkness. Invest in biblical clarity today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.